Guess who's back? Back again. Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? I've been listening to a lot of Eminem of late. Blamed on Super Bowl, and Rihanna is gonna be spotlighting next year. I'm kind of excited to see what that's going to be about. Yeah, whoever knows me knows why I had to second guess what the hell is going on. Anyway, let me stop looking at my phone first of all and pay attention to you. So today I'm going to be introducing my poetry segment. The thoughts in the AM, kind of a little tricky to do so right now. So I decided, why don't I just start with content that I already have, which is the poems I've been writing over on my page, Theetri. Now, I started this out back in 2019, and the last post I did was sometime this year in May or June. That was the last poem. So I want to get back to writing more often some of these pieces because it's a whole universe. Like, I look at the MCU and everything. Yes, there's just there what I have in store with Theetri and all my friends who are like, when is the day we're going to ever see a book or a feature or a character concept? Winky, give us something. You always, like, the few people I've told this story are like, oh my God, that sounds like amazing. Show me. Because it's very different when someone describes something that is in their mind and then tries to relate to you, because the colors, the scenery, the facial expression, the character themselves might be completely different. It's up to one person and their perception of who they want to, picture in that particular role. So today I'm going to start with the very, very first poem. I'm going to scroll all the way down and I'm going to do perhaps a set every evening and then see how long I can keep this up, keep it going, so that you don't get lost. So essentially, what is Theetri? Theetri is this beautiful, magical, I'll say historic, period drama / everything that you've seen in anime boiled into one world, one universe. That is how I've constructed it, more or less. And with my internet, please don't be shady and let me at least scroll down. So what essentially Theetri is featuring is the journey of identities, and this is demonstrated by 3 main characters. Of course, I cannot give away everything as to the supporting characters and all. It will be just an experience to go through. We have 3 main characters, Yasigi, Clay, and Amira. I do not recall exactly when I came up with these names. It might be 3 years or so back. We'll see. I guess also around the same time when I started writing Theetri on my phone. So I would say around 2018 is where I sort of did a bit of research on the names of the characters. What is the meaning behind those names? So each of the names is kind of special to the specific character. There's a little bit of Easter egg in every poetry that I've written. So essentially, the poems have a minimum 2 layers. It can go beyond 2 layers, but I'll keep it between 2 to 3. So the first layer is as you read is as you get. So if you want to read on the surface, you can understand. Some of the poems have this a bit easier to get to, straight to the point. And when I get across to some of these poems, I'll be able to highlight them. Then there's the second layer where you connect the image with the text, with the description of the image. And it turns into those beautiful weaving of the narrative being told by the pictures, while still each stanza rhymes one specific word of that description of the image. Again, I'll give you as an example once you get to some of the pictures. These are works that I started much later on. It wouldn't be the same as the first ones that I wrote. I'm just trying to reference. This would start with the first image as of January 12, 2019. It's called An Earth Expression. And when you get to that poem, it will give you a sort of a context of what I mean by those 2 layers. Now the third layer is a little bit mixed here and there. Its essence is for me to know what part of the story that particular poem is referencing to. So if I had chapters, and that's why I say like this whole thing is like a book, but no one can see it aside from me, and I need to get it out of my head and at least have it out there in the world. Essentially, it let me know which part of the chapter that particular poem is, or where in the storyline that is happening. And it's very important and critical because it either turns to be a turning point or it's a key indicator into the way the character thinks and processes things. So you'd see one particular theme discussed by the three characters and seeing how they perceive that particular theme in a different way. Again, I'll give you an example as we get there with some of these concepts. And last but not least, there's sometimes a fourth layer. It could sometimes be the third layer. And this could be a message to myself. I don't know which creative does not leave a message for themselves within their work. So sometimes some of my poems are referencing to something that is happening to me, and yet I can relate to a character. Try to guess. Not so easy to get to really pinpoint which is which, because sometimes I really hide it deep in, or I just put it in your face. It's right there. So don't try to guess per se. It's just to give you an idea that that fourth dimension does exist in some of the works, not all of them. All right, so we get started with the first one. So the first one is this. This was the very first image I posted, which is called Heart. And I felt this was quite important because this poem was the beginning of this whole thing. It's where it just jump started. I was so scared. I remember describing this story to someone back in 2015, and that's the first time the idea of Theetri came about. It wasn't so in depth. It was purely about dancing, showcasing that from different characters. Back then, I had a name that these days would be a little controversial for my dance name. However, it used to depict the way I would change my mode or persona depending on the song and the mood of the song. And so I described this to someone, and I wanted to always depict and bring real people into music with the performance and the dance. And before I knew it, I just started building this whole world around them. And as the world continued, as social issues started popping up, either coming from where I'm currently staying in Ethiopia, looking into the global situation with what happened last year, to also the whole Black Lives Matter, the whole aspect of identity. A lot of these issues are popping up within the characters, and somehow they got intertwined in the mix. So it's a journey of identities, as I describe it on the channel, on the page. So the Instagram page is called Theetri, and there it gives you a brief description of what it's all about. So the first character is Yasigi. Yasigi is a medicine man's daughter. I'm smiling because when I finally got to how she was born, like the story of her birth is something, actually for each one of these characters. Now that I think about it, I'm not really developed in depth for the other two, Clay and Amira, because they have kind of mysterious backgrounds to both of them. Though the birth of Yasigi is well documented, it's a very significant part of this whole story. So I felt to start the storyline with Yasigi, talking about the heart, and then moving on to the mind, to the body, and then the mind. So let's go into the poem. Of course, I'll cut up to where you want to go straight to the poem, and then we get started. All right, heart. Beating slow, beating fast, hum. That is your physical representation, but your true form is something else. You scare me when I realize your influence. You excite me when we are on the other side of impossible. You annoy me when you choose to sit by a fence instead of choosing a side. You free me when you accept and let go. You zone me out when you fight with the mind. You take me through so many motions. That's why you make each day a new chapter. You are my will. Heart. Yes. That is the description of Yasigi. And here it was just talking about memoirs. It was to give sort of an insight into the character as well, and how with their identity, they have these different motions like a heart. So there is the whole representation, the physical representation as stanza 1 and stanza 2, that talks about how the heart, its main function is beating, but sometimes it's beating fast, sometimes beating slow. There's a hum if you're lying on someone's chest. And it's talking about that physical representation and translating that into this ethereal representation of heart. And most of the times when we talk about heart, we associate an emotion to it. So that's why the next following 3 stanzas start with a feeling. scare, which is based on feeling fright, excitement, or annoyance. And eventually talking about a state of feeling, which is where you free me or you make me zone out. And eventually is looking at how the heart has played this whole role within the persona of the person or overall the identity. So within the first stanza, as I mentioned, is talking about the actual rhythms of the heart, the beating, slow beating, fast, hum. This is going to give a sort of an idea that her storyline would more or less be fluctuating up and down. And then looking at that realization as to when their influence, one as a character, where you scare me, this line, you scare me when I realize your influence, is two ways. Both to the person themselves, when they realize how their emotions tend to also influence what they do, unless they're aware of them and how they can capitalize on the emotion to analyze the situation better. Whether it's something that is going against their values or it's a situation that is actually making them feel like, okay, this is aligning with me or not. And the second part is also just overall as the character themselves. Since again, we're aligning this character to heart, the people around them also feel that sense of uneasiness, realizing how through their words and action, they also influence them. Again, remember Yasigi is a medicine man's daughter. I will get into her story over time. She's quite an interesting character overall. And so it comes to also put a pretext as to why what the events that happened to her, also considering the people aside her. Part of you excite me when we are on the other side of impossible speaks to the same. The soul is here to experience a journey. And again, here it's contentious to people. It depends on what you believe. But for me, I believe that in terms of our spirit, we're here for different experiences, and our emotions tend to tune with us with what is making us feel joyous or stuck or stagnant. All of it are cues. If your physical body, you pinch like this and you feel something and you know, okay, ow, that's pain. You know where exactly it is, how much of a threshold it is. Sometimes, you can describe to someone there's pain in my belly or something of the sort. When it comes to emotions, unless you're really conscious of what affects you, your values, the state of the environment, that you can be able to pinpoint, okay, this emotional behavior is because of XYZ. If it's not there, then you don't understand how it would be, it kind of be, fluctuating. So again, this speaks to how both as the emotion of understanding beyond the way of thinking or beyond an imaginary wall, that the feeling is excitement, that you realize what was impossible is possible. And this also speaks to her leadership and how she again engages with her community. The second part is again, you annoy me when you choose to sit by a fence instead of choosing a side. This is a critical line where in one point in the story where things now diverge would be because of this. So the annoyance is particularly to the external world of those she was meant to lead and guide within her community. And then it becomes a state of regret every time she recalls being on the fence about making a critical decision that ended up changing the course of things and spilled over to this whole universe of Theetri. It does go further and say, you free me when you accept and let go. And this talks about the full circle experience that eventually somewhere down the line, her learning how to accept and let go is her freedom. The more she gets stuck in the past, she will always become a prisoner of that past. And again, speaking to some of these activities, or not activities, events that happened that led to the whole being on the side of choosing on the fence is what will later become a key realization for her identity. And then comes this interesting line, you zone me out when you fight with the mind. Now this is going to speak to another branch in the story. And the mind, as I mentioned, each of the characters has a specific, let's say, patron or patroness of their identity. So as I mentioned with Yasigi, it's the heart. With Clay, it's the body, and with Amira is the mind. So this speaks to two ways. Again, with herself and also with Amira. And this is going to be where the question will be, who's being zoned out? Because then that implies a third character in it. And it's going to be interesting because this plays as well towards the cliffhanger of the whole story. And lastly, you take me through so many emotions. That is why you make each day a new chapter. This talks about, like, every single day, if you had the same stagnant feeling or emotion, you will not identify one day from another. The reason why when we refer to our past, we refer either back to a date or a day, we associate a particular feeling and how that connects with it. It could be extreme joy or sadness or anger or even just the same apathy, like nothing. We associate it to a particular day. And so this is talking about how those motions do create a beauty of colors. And I've said this so many times on this channel that you're supposed to make your own painting. Like, your life is up to you. You have the brush stroke. Sometimes you have control. Sometimes others contribute to it. Again, there are things you can be wildered to add on, and there are other things that are painted into your own painting. And overall, it becomes a unique setup of who you are or what your life story is. So that's what this whole speaking is. And this could also speak to how within the group, she is the one who creates those kind of motions and colors based on those different motions and decisions or indecisions that were made. And lastly, the word is that you are my will. This line speaks to the whole story of Yasigi's particular role and the willpower. Now, this does not deter from all the other characters and the willpower that they contribute. It's so much so that she, because of where, as I mentioned, her storyline starts, impacted everyone else's storyline, and it just became this domino effect. And it will always be a test of will for her. So that's why the poem ends with that. And that is Heart, the description of Heart. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And it will be very interesting to see your inputs and insights on how you interpreted the poem from your perspective. So there's a little Easter eggs.